I've decided to write down my thoughts in real time while playing different RPGs, turning this into an ongoing first impressions experience. I want to see how my opinions change the longer I spend with each game, so I'll be checking in at the 1, 5 hour, 10 hour, 20 hour marks, and then again at the end. I may not need that much time for each one of these games, but that will be my benchmarks. The game I'm playing this time is Final Fantasy I Pixel Remaster on PC. I don't know what to expect going into this one because I tried playing the original version many years ago and I just didn't like it, so I'm going to give it another shot now. I generally love Final Fantasy games, but I just haven't played most of them, so I want to change that. I don't know much about this game specifically, so I'll have to figure it out on my own, since I'm going to avoid using any guides for this playthrough. I am excited to give this one another shot though. While I'm playing and sharing my thoughts, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't played Final Fantasy I yet, like me, and want to go in completely blind, consider this your spoiler warning. If you have played it, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and with that all out of the way, I'll check back in when I hit the 1 hour mark. I made it to the 1 hour mark in Final Fantasy I, and so far I'm enjoying it. The story isn't the strongest, but I remember reading somewhere that the stories were extremely simple back then. I might be wrong about that, but I feel like I've seen that somewhere. Before we start the game, we get to pick the 4 characters we want to play with. The Warriors of Light, I guess. I chose the warrior that I named after myself, a thief named Morgan, a white mage named Robin, and the classic black mage named Vivi, after the black mage of my favorite Final Fantasy game. When the game finally opens up, we get a little scene that tells us about the world falling into darkness. That the seas are raging, the winds are dying, and the earth is decaying, but the world can be saved as long as the prophecy of the 4 Warriors of Light show up and use the power of the crystals that they all possess. Then we're thrown into the game. We start on the world map right outside of a town named Cornelia, and a castle known as Castle Cornelia. After talking with some of the locals and the king of the castle, we find out that his most trusted knight has kidnapped his daughter, the Princess of Cornelia, Sarah, and he asks us, since we all possess crystals, to head to the Chaos Shrine and to save her. Knowing how much grinding some of these older JRPGs require you to do, I went and battled for a little while before heading to the shrine, fighting creatures such as goblins and wolves, some pretty iconic monsters from other Final Fantasy games, at least the ones I've played in the past. It was really neat to see how much the designs have stayed the same from the earliest version of the game, but also how much different they are now. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really like them. Before we head any further into the story, I want to talk about combat. Mostly combat is very standard turn-based battling. We can pick from attack, item, magic, defend, and flee. Attack being a standard attack with the weapon we have equipped, magic requiring MP to use spells. The thing I found interesting is that instead of like in modern JRPGs or RPGs in general, the magic doesn't have the number that comes out of your MP pool. In this game, you can cast a level 1 spell as many times as you have MP. So to start out, my Black Mage only had 3 level 1 MP, meaning that I could cast fire 3 times, for instance. I'm used to other games where the character has 50 MP and fire would cost like 6 to cast, and each other magic spell would have its own cost. I feel like I sort of like it more this way because it's just simple. Also, you get MP for higher level spells too, which require you to have that MP type to cast instead of level 1 base MP. I hope I explained that in a way that makes sense. Anyways, another weird thing about magic is that you don't earn it by leveling up. You just buy it at the shops in the game. There is a white magic and a black magic shop in each of the 2 major towns I've been in. The first town has level 1 spells, and the second town has level 2 spells. We can only hold 3 per level, so you sort of have to pick how you want to build your character. Anyways, item is pretty standard. It'll allow you to use something like a potion from the menu. We can defend, which will take less damage from physical attacks. And lastly is flee, which will allow you to escape from battle. I haven't had to use this yet, but we'll see if I have to use it in the future. I think that covers combat for the time being, and I'll come back to it later if something else changes, but I don't think it will. We can face up to 9 enemies at one time, which is very stressful if you're not prepared for it. When our characters level up, we increase in a few stats, like health, strength for attack damage, agility for how quickly we attack, stamina, which I'm not really sure how that works yet, intellect, which is how effective our spells are, and luck, which is how often we will land critical hits and dodge incoming attacks. After grinding a few battles and leveling up to level 4, we went to the Chaos Shrine, found some items, and then fought Garland, the knight that kidnapped Sarah. He tells us that he can't lose in battle, but we make pretty quick work of him and save Sarah, returning her back to the castle. When we get back, the king tells us that he will build the bridge so that we can head north, and that he believes that we're the Warriors of Light. Sarah gives us a loot, but as for now, I have no idea what we need it for. We can leave the first area and head north. When we arrive at the bridge, we get more story in the way of a still image with scrolling text. This tells us that the Warriors of Light still aren't sure what the crystals are used for, but they must continue on with their journey. After doing some grinding, we come across the new town of Pravaka. This town is currently being attacked by a bunch of pirates and they ask for our help. This area doesn't really have much happening in the way of story outside of that, but when we confront the pirate captain, he attacks us and we need to fight him and all of his crew members, which we can take out without any issues. After the fight, he tells us sorry and he gives us his ship, because he's changing his ways now. I don't really believe him, but it's nice that we can sell this ship from place to place now, making traveling so much easier. Speaking of traveling, since I'm playing the Pixel Remaster of this game, I have the option to turn encounters on and off, which is an absolute breath of fresh air, because there are so many encounters when you have them on, and I think back in the day that was part of the reason I stopped playing this game. This basically got me to the 1 hour mark, besides exploring around and leveling up a bit more, but I didn't advance the story. The last thing I want to mention is that we can buy and find equipment around the world to equip our characters with. Each character can equip a weapon, shield, armor for our arms, head, and body. These will increase our defense and accuracy, as well as some of the other stats we have that aren't affected by leveling up. Certain pieces of equipment have special characteristics, such as casting a spell, or taking less damage from ice, thunder, so on and so forth. That takes us to the 1 hour mark, and so far with the ability to turn off encounters, I'm really enjoying my time with this game. The art is cute, and it looks great with the remastered version. The battling can be a bit annoying, but overall I think it's a good time. I like that the game gives you a task for the story, but also gives you a lot of freedom to explore, and just check out the world once you get the ability to do so. Overall, I'm having fun, and I'm excited to eventually go through all the mainline Final Fantasy games, since it's something I've never done before. I'll check back in at the 5 hour mark and let you know how I'm feeling about everything then. I usually do 1, 5, 10, and 20 hours, then cover the end of the game, but I don't think this game is that long, so I'll probably do 5 and 10 hours, and then cover the end game instead. Alright, enough rambling, I'll check back in 5 hours. I've made it to the 5 hour mark in Final Fantasy 1, and I feel like I'm speed running through this game. All my characters are level 23 or 24, we have really good equipment, mainly for the warrior, and I'm starting to get access to level 7 and 8 spells already. Before I get into my thoughts about the game, I want to give a short recap of all the things we've done in this 4 hour window. After the 1 hour mark, we left Cornelia and headed south on our brand new boat. After exploring around the map for a bit, we found a new city and castle. The city of Elfhelm and the Elfin Castle. Elfhelm was a small city in what appears to be the woods. We find out by talking to some of the locals around that the Elf Prince has been asleep for years, and they have tried a bunch to try to wake him up, but they just can't figure anything else out. So we decided to help the townspeople, but before that I spent some time upgrading my spells and equipment. This section of the game became a fetch quest more than anything else, honestly. We had to head to Marsh Cave, a dark poison-infested cave that if you're not careful could wipe your party out before you know it. We need to get to the bottom floor of the Marsh Cave to find the crown, which is held in a chest protected by Vizcodemon, which I 100% said wrong, which remind me of little squid wizards. This fight isn't bad, they resist magic, but physical attacks take them out without any problems. Once they're defeated, we can head to another castle to the north called the Western Keep. This is a rundown castle where King Assos asked us to get the crown. I did this part out of order, so I came back here and he was like, I fooled you into giving me the crown! And I was just confused because I didn't even know he wanted it. Funny enough, I actually died on my first attempt just because of bad luck. That's all it was. It was my turn order and the attacks he chose to use during the first attempt, but I didn't want to take any chances, so I leveled up a couple times and went back in and took care of business. He likes to spam magic spells, but if you're ready to heal, then he isn't much of a problem. My second attempt went much better. I put haste on my Black Mage Vivi and just hit him with level 4 spells. Once he's defeated, we get the Crystal Eye, which if you remember the witch from the beginning of the game, Matoya, she was missing her eye, so we have to take that Crystal Eye back to her, which in return, she gives us the Jolt Tonic to wake up the Elf Prince, and then she tells us that she expected us to be more handsome. Thanks for the boost of confidence there. Now with the Jolt Tonic in our hand, we can head back to the Elven Castle and wake up the Prince. Once the Prince is awake, we get the Mystic Key, which will allow us to open a bunch of doors around the world that we previously couldn't. I went around and did all the ones that I knew of up to that point in the game, which gave us some new gear and a bunch of gil. Money in this game never seems to stick around for long though, so I'll be broke before I know it. I always feel like I'm broke. Probably because I go and buy any and all new spells in each new area. This ended up taking a bunch of time, but to progress the story, we just needed to head back to Cornelia Castle and grab the Nitro Powder, which is in one of those rooms we couldn't access before. With the Nitro Powder in our hand, we can head west from Cornelia and find the dwarf village called Mount Duger. There's a dwarf named Narek that wants the Nitro Powder so that he can blow up a wall in the south of the cave. We tell him that he can use it, and we get a cutscene where the explosion causes lands to disappear on the world map, and this will let us take our boat further west and get us outside of this middle section of the map. Up until this point, we've been stuck in. Once outside, we find the village of Melmond, a small village that was once lively, but now everything is decaying and dying. The townspeople tell us that ever since this vampire showed up, all of this has been happening. So we decide to help the villagers and find this vampire and give him the business. Before that, I was able to upgrade my equipment and spells again. The villagers tell us that the vampire went west to the Cavern of Earth. This is what I would say is the first true dungeon of the game. Like, the other ones count, but this one just feels like an actual dungeon, and is much more challenging than the previous ones. It's still just a cave, but this one is made up of brown rocks this time. I would like to tell you that the enemies are more difficult here, but that's just not true. They hit harder for sure, but since I'm doing so much more damage, and most of them show up in 1 or 2 at a time, that I never really had any issues in this dungeon. You will in fact fight a ton of earth elementals, because they guard almost every single treasure chest in this dungeon, it feels like. Anyways, once we make it to the bottom of the dungeon, or at least we think it's the bottom of the dungeon, we run into the vampire. He's standing in the middle of the room all by himself. I almost feel bad for him. I went into this battle expecting a challenging boss, but it wasn't that at all. He missed his opening attack, and between 3 physical attacks and some fire, we killed him right away. That was the whole fight. Literally 4 attacks. This gives us a Star Ruby and the beginning of another fetch quest. We need to take the Star Ruby to another cave, even more west from here, and give it to this big stone golem. He will then eat it, and then he'll let us pass, which will let us get through this set of mountains and into another set. This leads us to the Sage's Cave, where he tells us that the vampire wasn't the reason for the decay of the village, and that he was only a henchman. We need to take the Earth Rod and open up a passage that will let us go further into the Cavern of Earth. So we need to head back to the Cavern of Earth and unlock a new path that takes us even deeper into the cave. So without any other thought in the world, that is what I ended up doing. We made it all the way down to the 5th floor of the dungeon, where we find a room that has a yellow crystal ball on the ground. When we go to touch it, someone begins to talk to us, and this summons Lich, the Earth Fiend and the first major boss of the game. I told you it felt like this was the first true dungeon. He tells us that he's been feeding on the Earth, and we find out that he is the reason for the world decaying. My first attempt at this fight was not good. He beat me so fast. First off, he attacks with spells that hit for over 100 damage to all my party members, and a lot of my party aren't even at 200 total health yet. So that was not a good sign. He also doesn't take much damage from physical attacks, so I needed to rely on my Black Mage for damage. I wasn't prepared for this fight at all. I thought about it for a minute, and I was thinking I was going to have to go grind, but I decided to try the fight one more time, just to see if it would work out better for me the second time around, and I was able to beat him. I don't know if this was RNG luck or what, but I didn't struggle at all in the second battle. I needed to manage my healing spells better and just went full offensive with my physical attacks, and then with Vivi, my Black Mage, I just tried to burn him as much as I could. I might have gotten lucky because he was just putting my team asleep like 1 or 2 at a time, and then only physically attacking my warrior, whom has the most health. So maybe if I did that fight another 10 times, this would have been my only win, but as they say, a win is a win. Once we take him down, we get a pretty dramatic scene of him rotting away, and then the big yellow crystal that he was guarding starts to glow. This is our first active crystal, the Earth Crystal. This means that we're 25% of the way through the main task. Now we have some more freedom so we can explore the whole map, at least the parts that we can dock our boat at, and on the far east side of the world map, we find a dock that leads us to the village of Crescent Lake. A brand new area for us with brand new equipment and brand new spells. So of course I take the time to spend all my money and upgrade everything again. After upgrading, we head into the secret wooded area in Crescent Lake and find 10 men standing in a circle, trying to summon a monster or something. Actually, they're talking about the crystals and one of them give us a canoe. With the canoe, we can go through small areas of water that we couldn't previously access with our boat, meaning the whole center of this side of the map opens up to us and gives us 2 places to check out. The first is the Cavern of Ice, which is a small dungeon that has a couple floors, and in this area there are sections where the ground is frozen, causing us to take damage as we walk over them. So we need to move quickly here. The Cavern of Ice has some nice equipment like the ice armor for our warrior and the flame sword. Also at the bottom middle section of this area, we find the leva stone, which will be important later on, but for now we don't really need it. That's pretty much it for the Cavern of Ice, so we move on to Mount Gloog, which is the opposite of the Cavern of Ice. In this area we have to run through lava and take damage from that instead of ice. This dungeon is much larger. We get the ice sword and fire armor in the volcano that we can just run around in freely somehow before getting to the bottom floor. A massive 8-path area that we can get money and items. This seems like a pretty good place to grind if you were to need it. Yet again, the elemental monsters show up here, but this time they're the fire ones instead of earth. In the bottom left corner of the last floor of the dungeon, we find a red crystal ball on the ground, and when we interact with it, we summon another monster, Merilith, the Fire Fiend. She knows we killed the Earth Fiend and vows to defeat us, so we have to fight her for the second major boss fight of the game. Merilith is a half snake, half woman with 6 arms. At least that's what I think she is, and this ends up being another game of having the right equipment and the right spells to deal damage to her. Since we picked up the ice armor that lets us take less damage from fire, and the ice brand that lets us deal more damage to fire creatures, we ended up being in good shape in this fight. At least with our warrior. My strategy for this fight was to attempt to set up on her. I started with casting Invisible to increase our invasion, and Protect to increase our defense, which this did work for a little bit, until she ended up casting Hold on my white mage, making her not be able to do anything after that. Then I would cast Haste with my black mage on my black mage, so that I could use spells faster in battle, and then I just let my warrior and thief attack over and over again. My thief was pretty much worthless in this fight, so my warrior did a bunch of damage before she was able to kill everyone else with her fire. Since I couldn't heal, I basically had to just let them die, and we finished the fight the very next turn, with our warrior being alive. Once the fight is over, we activate the red crystal in the dungeon, and then we can leave. That's 2 out of the 4 of the major crystals. This is what I'm talking about. I feel like I've done so much in this game in such a short amount of time. After going back to Crescent Lake and healing everyone up, I roam around for a while because I had no idea what to do. Do you remember that leva stone we found in the Cavern of Ice? We needed to take that south of Crescent Lake to the large desert area, and this unburies the Final Fantasy staple of an airship. With our new airship, we can explore around the whole map, now landing and finding a bunch of new areas. I haven't really done anything in those places, so I'll talk about them when we actually go there and complete something. In the meantime, we find the Citadel of Trials, which is a portal puzzle that took way too long. We just need to pick the right portal to advance further into the castle rooms, and if we pick the wrong one, we go back to the start. Once we complete it, we come to the room with a boss fight and a treasure chest. The treasure chest has a rat's tail in it, some key item that I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with yet, and a mini boss fight with 2 dragon zombies, which is pretty easy with our new strength from leveling up. We're able to leave now and go back to exploring. One thing I really like about the airship menu is that it tells you how many chests you've collected in each area, and so far I haven't missed any of them. We found a few villages as I mentioned, but this takes us to the 5-hour mark. So how am I feeling about Final Fantasy 1 now? I really like it. Sometimes I wish the directions of what we were supposed to do was a little more clear, but something about just running around and exploring is very enjoyable. I have a bunch of new places to check out now, so I think the game will continue to go quickly, but overall I'm having a good time. My characters are leveling at a good pace, and I don't feel like I need to grind a bunch besides for getting Gil. I'm always broke in this game! I'm excited to continue playing, so I'll check back in at the 10-hour mark, or endgame, depending on how long it takes from here on out. We only have 2 more crystals to activate, so I guess we'll see. I made it to the 10-hour mark, and the endgame all at the same time. So before I get into my ending thoughts, let's talk about what we did to get to that point. After completing the trials and upgrading our classes to level 2, I was finally ready to head into the next part of the game. I also think I did some of this out of order, so if it seems like I backtracked a lot, I probably did. First, I made my way to Gaia, where I was heading there to get upgraded spells for my white and black mages. Blizzaga being the most important for my black mage, and my white mage at the time, I didn't know it, but I skipped over getting Holy, even though that would have made my life so much easier. We also find out that there used to be a fairy here, but it hasn't been seen in a long time. A man tells us that he captured her and sold her to a caravan. That caravan sets up shop somewhere in the desert. That's all we can really do here for now, so I made my way to the other village that we can go to now that we have access to the airship, called Onrak. Onrak is another small village that has a bunch of story points, but not much else in the way of useful things. I was able to get Healaga for my white mage, which is a spell that heals every party member with a small amount of health, but since this is an upgraded version of heal, it can actually be pretty useful. A man here tells us that he saw something fall out of the sky and land next to the waterfall, but no one in the town seems to believe him. So that was my first clue on what we needed to do next. We're also able to talk to a woman over by a barrel submarine. She tells us that the submarine works, but that you would run out of oxygen right as you go underwater, and if only there was something that could fix that problem, then we could actually use it. That's all we have for now. Now we have a few places that we can go and check out. I decided to start by heading to the waterfall cavern to investigate the thing that fell out of the sky there. This is a bit of a small dungeon, but the enemies aren't difficult, and I mostly just turned off encounters while exploring. The only two things that you can find here are in the back of the cavern, which is the robot that fell from the sky, who gives us a warp cube for later on, and a room full of chests that give us some gil and some other items. After exploring the waterfall cavern and having no clue what section of the desert to check out, I accidentally walked into a square that took us into a hidden area where the caravan was set up. We can buy the ferry from him for 40,000 gil, which just seems outrageous in my opinion, and take her back to Gaia. In the top right corner of Gaia is a small pond, and if we take the ferry there, we can talk to her, and she'll give us an oxal, which will let our party breathe underwater and solves the problem of the submarine. So yet again, we need to head back to Onrak and tell her that we can breathe underwater now, and that we need to use the barrel submarine to get down to the sunken shrine, where we hope to restore it and maybe even run into another crystal. After all that back and forth, I finally made it to the third major dungeon of the game and the home of the Water Fiend. The sunken shrine has a pretty neat design. There is both going up and down floors. Sometimes you need to go up to get back down, but there are also a ton of chests in this dungeon. I didn't struggle with any of the monsters in this area. I will point out that you need to find the Rosetta Stone on the 5th floor because we'll need it for the next major dungeon in the game. I really like the design that it's an old destroyed tower. Some of the paths are destroyed so we can only go in specific directions, but it just feels like a tower that's underwater. We also meet some mermaids that are being held there against their will because of the Water Fiend, the Kraken. The Kraken is a giant purple Kraken that focuses heavily on multiple hit physical attacks and blinding our party members. I don't know if I just got extremely lucky up to this point, but I've never missed an attack while blind. Does anyone know the percentage that you're supposed to miss, or is it just extremely low in the Pixel Remaster? Anyways, the Kraken doesn't have that much health with only 1800, and he's weak to lightning, so my goal in this fight was to focus on using magic and attacking with both my warrior and thief. I also added protection on my party to protect them from that physical attack that he does, as well as increasing my evasion. Without a mage, you would be screwed during this fight because physical attacks do nothing unless you get a crit. I can't say that I struggled at all during this fight besides that I'm stingy with items, so I decided that I wasn't going to use an ether on my black mage, so I started using weaker lightning spells, like normal thunder. But outside of that, I was just trying to keep everyone from not being blind, and I finished the fight without losing any characters in a pretty easy fight overall. We get some experience for winning, and we activate the water crystal. 3 down, 1 to go. After completing the sunken shrine and collecting the Rosetta Stone, we need to figure out how to get it deciphered, which ends up being pretty easy. There's a man in Gaia that tells us that his brother Une would be able to do that, and all the way back at Melmon by the cemetery there is a man named Une there. So we just need to take the Rosetta Stone there, where he'll decipher it and teach us the Lufinian language. What is that, you ask? Well, of course it's another village that we couldn't do anything at until this very moment. It's on the far southeast of the top continent, surrounded by a massive forest. Lufinia is a small village with not all that much to do there. There are level 8 white and black magic shops that give us the ability to purchase Flare and Full Life, which funny enough, I didn't even know these were here the first couple times I visited Lufinia. Anyways, now that we can speak the language, we can learn the backstory of the Wind Fiend. That is, if you actually care. But we only need to actually talk to one person, the guy in the bottom left corner of the village. He will give us a chime, which will unlock the doors to the Mirage Tower that's in the desert northwest from Lufinia. This is the beginning of a 2-in-1 dungeon, which is divided into 2 parts, the Mirage Tower and the Flying Fortress. I would like to think that the dungeon doesn't actually mean much until we get to the Flying Fortress, but Mirage Tower is pretty interesting, showing us the robots and what seems to be some ancient technology. The first half of the 2-in-1 dungeon is Mirage Tower, a very brown, octagon-shaped 3-floor dungeon. A lot of chests in this one with some items, gil, and new equipment, but overall this part isn't bad. There are a few brand new enemies in this dungeon, like the Guardian, which is some sort of robot-looking thing, but with the right spells and character level, everything in here was a breeze to deal with. At the end of the dungeon, we have to fight a blue dragon, which is guarding the teleportation portal, but he's also extremely simple to deal with because you fight him alone, and I just used some good old-fashioned brute force for this mini-boss. completing the first half of the dungeon and teleporting us to the Flying Fortress, a much more complex dungeon with stronger enemies. The Flying Fortress is made up of 5 floors. Each one has its own design with a lot of blues and grays that work well with the clouds in the background. There are a lot of chests in this dungeon and a lot of strong, hard-hitting monsters. But I just want to talk about a few things before talking about the boss fight. First, there's a chest on the second floor that contains Adamite. This item lets us take it back to the blacksmith in the dwarf village, and he will craft us the second best weapon in the whole game, the Excalibur. I don't think it's worth leaving the dungeon for unless you're really struggling. Instead, I think you should just head there right after you complete the Flying Fortress. The next thing that I thought was fun is that on floor 4, it just ends up being a massive square that looks exactly the same everywhere. Besides, there's 2 portals. I didn't know that there was 2, and I thought I just needed to figure out the secret on the floor until I accidentally went into the right one. It's such a random thing to throw into the game when everything else so far has been extremely straightforward. Anyways, we take that portal to go to the 5th and final floor. When we get there, there is a somewhat long bridge that we have to cross, and then at the end we find the green crystal on the floor. But I want to talk about a secret boss that can only spawn on this bridge. I didn't know that until after I completed the game, and I went back to try to fight him. The boss's name is Warmech, and honestly he might be one of the most challenging boss fights in the entire game. He just does so much damage to the whole party that you really need to be strong to take him out. He has a decent amount of health, but just a lot of firepower. If you would just randomly run into him on your way to the Wind Fiend in this dungeon, it would probably for sure wipe out your party. Anyways, I came back later on and beat him, but I just thought it was something to mention. At the end of the bridge, we can touch the green crystal, which will awaken the Wind Fiend Terramat. She's a 5-headed green hydra of some sort. This fight can be challenging, and I did struggle a bit on it, but I was able to beat her first try. So let's recap this fight. Unlike the Kraken, Terramat doesn't have any weaknesses, has a lot more health at 2400, and cycles through 4 elemental spells that hit all 4 party members. I opened this fight up by attacking with both my warrior and thief, not that that's any different from any other fight, increasing my party's evasion and defense, and then I started casting Blizzaga with my black mage because I hadn't bought Flare yet. I didn't heal before this fight, so I was out of MP for a lot of my spells, which is an absolute rookie mistake. After that starting phase, I just focused on healing the party the best I could and attacking over and over again. This fight ended up being pretty uneventful, and I was just attacking and healing over and over, hoping that my party wouldn't just die. Which I did a decent job with until the very end of the fight, when everyone had died besides my black mage, who lived on 30 HP, after going through the cycle of healing, reviving, healing, over and over again until we got through the fight. I think I got extremely lucky that the flare at the end of the fight that Terramat used didn't do more damage, or I would have lost that fight for sure. Anyways, with one final Thundaga, I was able to beat her and win the fight. I got some experience for just my black mage, activated the final crystal, the wind crystal, and then I teleported out of the Flying Fortress to revive my team, heal up, upgrade some spells and equipment, and head to the final dungeon of the game, now that all the crystals were activated. We have to go back to where it all started. Sort of. Chaos Shrine. But this time we used the power of the now activated crystals to travel 2,000 years into the past to start this endless cycle of doom. The final dungeon is a Chaos Shrine, but this time it's restored because we're in the past. I honestly think this dungeon is a bit underwhelming in terms of looks and design, but the monsters here are extremely strong and can really help you level up if you're a bit under-leveled going into it, like I was. Each floor in the past is themed based on the 4 elemental fiends, and at the end of each floor we have to face the bosses again in an almost boss rush section. Because I was under level, I made these fights much more difficult, but overall they're really not that bad. I'll quickly run through them and note anything that might have happened, but the reason we're here is to face the final boss of Final Fantasy I. On the first floor of past Chaos Shrine, we find a yellow crystal ball, and we have to fight Lich again. Which this fight was pretty easy, another setting up with Protect and Evasion, then spamming attacks and magic. Pretty uneventful. I finished this fight with almost full health. These boss fights really ended up being a lot easier with the addition of Flare. Next up on the fire floor of the Chaos Shrine is Merilith again, and we beat her first try as well. I use the same strategy on all these boss fights now, attack with the warrior and thief, set up protect and increase my invasion, and then spam whatever black magic spell does the most damage. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, so I'll skip to the next floor, the water floor, where we have to fight the Kraken again, which again is a first attempt win. All these bosses are much stronger than before, but overall they're not all that challenging. We can move on to floor 4 of the Chaos Shrine, the Wind floor, where we're able to pick up the best sword in the game, the Masamune. This sword is an absolute game changer and does so much damage to literally everything. This makes the fight with Terramat a lot easier. This fight is the one that feels the most similar to when we just fought her, so it was the same strategy again for me. Finally, we make it all the way to the final floor on the Chaos Shrine and find Garland in the center room of that floor. This is where he tells us that it doesn't matter what we do because it's an endless cycle. Even if he dies, the fiends will bring him back and he will corrupt the world again. He tells us all this before he transforms into Chaos, a giant version of himself, and then he attacks us. Chaos reminds me of a big underworld demon or some kind of devil. He's just kind of flying off to the ledge of some land that we're standing on, and we can attack him that way. This fight was very difficult, and I lost my first attempt pretty easily. I was just way too underleveled for the fight, and he was one-shotting all my party members with physical attacks. So I went and I grinded a couple levels with all my characters, and I tried again, where yet again he beat me, but this time I could actually stay alive after a physical attack. Well, at least with my warrior. I knew I was extremely close to being strong enough to win, so I went and leveled up my party to level 35 and tried it one more time. This was all it took. I was finally able to win the fight this time around. But before that, let's talk about the fight with Chaos and my strategy for the fight overall. The first thing I did going into the fight was cast Protect and increase my evasion, because if he uses Earthquake and it hits you, you die. It's that simple. Then using my Black Mage, I used Temper on my Warrior and Thief to increase their attack, and then I followed it up with Haste, casting it on both of them again. Then it was a matter of keeping everyone alive and throwing in Flare and Holy when I had a chance with my mages. This ended up being a matter of endurance for this fight at my current level. Now let's talk about Chaos. He has 20,000 HP, resists all spells, is immune to all statuses, and will heal 9,999 health if you end up being unlucky. It's a low chance for him to heal himself, but he absolutely can. He mostly attacks with physical strikes, but has a bunch of other spells as well. Spells such as Flare, Blaze, Tsunami, Cyclone, and Earthquake to deal with. One of the most important items for us to equip going into this fight were ribbons. The ribbon will protect us from most status effects, including insta-kill from the Earthquake. That move is extremely scary. That's about it for the fight though. If you can stay alive and are able to just continue to attack, you'll eventually win the fight. Once we defeat Chaos, we get a more dragged out boss dying cutscene, but it feels like it should be there because you know he's the final boss. This is followed up with a picture of the world in peace and some scrolling text moving vertically on the screen. It basically tells us that the cycle was ended by defeating Garland, but now that we did, no one will remember that we did, or who we even are, so we won't get any credit for it. All of that is no big deal. But the one thing that stands out to me is that when we go back to the present, Garland will exist again in that timeline, meaning that it is possible that this could all happen again, I guess. Anyways, that completes Final Fantasy I Pixel Remaster. I finished with my party being at level 35, I had the best weapons for my Warrior and Thief, so that made things easier, and after figuring out a new strategy for taking down Chaos, that boss fight didn't end up being too bad. I actually really enjoyed my time with this game. I think the battle system is basic, but fights didn't take too long, and being able to turn off encounters was an absolute blessing. I feel like they did an incredible job with the Pixel Remaster, and I even went back and got all the achievements on Steam. That included getting all my characters to level 50, defeating one of every monster in the game, and playing the most pointless tile sliding game that is hidden behind a bunch of button commands while on the boat. Overall, I give this game a solid 8 out of 10. It didn't do anything overly special in my opinion, but I had fun playing it, especially because it ended up being a short adventure. Even after getting all the achievements, all my characters up to level 50 and defeating every monster I could, I only had 11.5 hours in the game total. If you get a chance and want to check out the beginning of the Final Fantasy series, I would recommend this one. That's all I got for Final Fantasy I Pixel Remaster though, so let me know what you think in the comments below. And with that, those have been my thoughts throughout my playthrough of Final Fantasy I Pixel Remaster. I hope that you enjoyed this video and how my thoughts of the game changed over the span of playing it. I'd love to know your thoughts about this and hear some different opinions. If you enjoyed this format and want to see more long-form playthrough reflections like this, let me know in the comments and tell me which JRPGs you'd like me to check out next. Liking the video really helps the channel out, and if you're into JRPG content, consider subscribing. There's more on the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.